Well, our theme today is the game of your life, and we're thinking about it in terms of what do we need to do to win the game of our life. And winning in life, as in football, begins with having a plan, begins with having a game plan. Mike Sherman has coached in the National Football League and in college for 33 years. And after several stops coaching in college, Mike's NFL career began as an assistant with the Green Bay Packers. He went on to become much to the delight of the Pranga family. He went on to become the Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator and later head coach of the Packers for 6 seasons, where he had great success. He was also the assistant head coach and offensive coordinator of the Houston Texans, head coach at Texas A&M for 4 years, and served as offensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins. This last year, in clearly the most challenging coaching situation he's ever faced in his life, Mike was the coach of the Nauset Regional High School team. Woo, there you go. Mike and his wife Karen have 5 children, Sarah, Emily, Matthew, Benjamin, and Selena, and they live in Dennis. And we're delighted that Mike has graciously agreed to share at all of our worship services this morning. And if you didn't see the Cape Cod Times yet, he is on the front page. He's written a front page story about the game later today. And sadly, he was exactly right in what he said 2 weeks ago about the Broncos beating the Patriots. But please give Mike Sherman a warm welcome. He's going to talk to us about the big game.
Good morning. When the pastor asked me to do this, I didn't realize how challenging this was going to be. But I've embraced that challenge, and one way that I figured would be the best way, the most natural way for me to do this, was to talk to y'all as if you were the team and I was the coach, and we're getting ready to play in the biggest game of our lives. And this game that we're going to play in is a game that 180 million people will watch. The tickets were sold for $850, and now $850 a piece, and now being sold for $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 a piece. So the magnanimity of this game is huge. So what I want to do is, the easiest thing for me to do last night when I was preparing for this was to do a pregame speech. You guys are the team, I'm the coach. We're getting ready to take the field the next day. Normally in the National Football League, what you do the night before a game is you have meetings, special teams first, then you go offense, defense, then you have a team meeting. The team meeting is run by the head coach, and then of course, every NFL team, you have the snack, which their snack is like a Thanksgiving Day dinner for you people. Okay? And it lasts for quite a while. But the players come in to listen to the head coach and talk in terms of how we have to win the game. When I started coaching at the Packers as the head coach, I originally started by talking about, hey, we can't turn the ball over. We can't throw interceptions. We have to have great security. We have to tackle. We have to block. I talked about that aspect of it. They were so tired of that aspect of it. So what I transitioned into was talking about my family and how football relates to life with my family. And I gave them numerous examples. So I transitioned into and got kudos for doing that, because they also, like me, believe that there's many aspects of football that are related to how we live our lives. Just look at the football. It's a ball. If you bounce it, it doesn't bounce back. Doug's ball bounces back when you put it on the ground. The baseball. The basketball bounces back. That ball goes off this way or that way. And it's a hard ball to bounce. You can't bounce it. You have to go chase it. The whole game of football is difficult. It's hard. 23 games these guys have played today. 23 games. You have no idea how tired they are, mentally and physically, going into this ball game. So I'm going to assume the role of the coach. That's the headliner there. So here, I'm going to assume. Are you ready to play this football game today? Yeah. I don't know if we can win with this group right here. This has been one heck of a journey, man. This has been one heck of a journey. We've had 300 practices. We've been at it for about 170 days. We've had 125 walkthroughs. When we started this thing, we had 95 players. Then we cut it down to 75. Then it's 53. And then we take the field with 45. We have 18 coaches. We have 8 practice squad players. And today we have one game to play. One game with everything is on the line. Now listen, let's not forget what just happened to us. We went through one heck of a journey. This journey has had its ups and downs. It's had its peaks and valleys. As you know, it's had its total peaceful moments and chaos. In the locker room before the game, it's peaceful, it's quiet, it's serene. We go on that field, it's going to be absolute chaos. And that's where we thrive the best, in chaotic situations. When the bombs are flying all around us, when people are attacking us, we do our best because we keep our focus on what has to get done. We're here today because we earned it. We stayed true to our values. We stayed true to what we knew it took to win. We never took our eyes off the road. Our focus was intense all the way. And when someone did take their eyes off the road, a teammate helped them get back in and on track to get to where we want to get. We never lost belief or trust or faith in the process because it is the process that got us here. Our vision wasn't on the Super Bowl. As some of you younger guys, when I asked you in preseason camp, why are we here? They said, we're in the Super Bowl. No, that's the prize. The Super Bowl is the prize. The goal is to have the process, the faith in what we're doing, the belief and trust in how we do things. The one thing that we've done better than any team I've ever coached in my career is we've stayed true to our core values. And without our core values, as a football team, we would be lost. We've had our ups and downs. We've gone off track, but able to get back on target again. We've had some players kind of jump out of the boat. We had to pull them back in. We had some players we had to kick out of the boat. But we stayed true to our core values. And let me remind you, men, today, it is your core values that brought you here, and it's the core values that will get you through the next football game. Remember what they are. And we talked about this in the preseason. We talk about this every week. Number one is truth. Be who you say you are. Do what you say you're going to do. If you are God-gifted to be the best football player in America, then be it. Be it. Be who you say you are. Be the best husband, best father you can be, best son you can be. Be that. And be the best football player you can be today. Surrender. We talk about that. What does that mean? Does that mean we're giving up? No. It means we're giving to the group. We're surrendering ourselves for the betterment of this group. We're unselfish in everything we do. We give back. We don't take. We give. We're unselfish. That's why we're the better team today. The third one, forgive. More so than any other aspect of life, forgiveness on a football field is one of the most important qualities because we can't play a perfect game. Guys are going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes today. I'm going to make bad calls today. We have to have the ability to forgive and move on. Not only each other, but ourselves. Because you can't hang on to a bad play. You can't hang on to a bad call. You have to move forward from there. And forgiveness is one of the most important parts of how we move forward. You've got to forgive yourself as much as your teammate when he makes a mistake. And last but not least, our core values, love. Now in football, we don't talk a lot about this, do we? Because it's not the macho thing to do. But love is the most important component in this room. Loving your teammate, your coaches, loving your God, your family, your friends, loving the fans who support us, loving the game of football and all it brings. Love is the glue that keeps us together. When we faced adversity, I told you way back when we lost that first ball game, we faced adversity that day. I said, it's either going to separate us or bring us together. And it's because of the love we have for each other, it pulled us together. And we were stronger because of it. That loss was as important as a win, if not more so, because it proved what we are and who we are. Love, truth, surrender, forgiveness, and love. This is our final game. We're going to take the approach. We're going to play one play at a time, one quarter at a time. We have to play the fourth quarter as hard as we play the first quarter. We have to play the fourth quarter as hard. You're going to be tired. You're going to be run down. You're going to be beat up. But you're going to play as hard as you possibly can. The expectation in the fourth quarter of this game is no different than the first quarter. Yeah, your best may not be as good as it was in the first quarter, but you're still going to give your best. Your best in that quarter. And that will bring us to victory. Don't ever look at the scoreboard. The scoreboard doesn't matter. Just take care of business on the field. Play the next play after that one's over. Rely on your instincts and your fundamentals. The game plan that we've had. It's a good game plan. You have to trust and believe in that game plan. Rely on that. It'll bring you where you need to go. I know we have a lot of young players in here. I know some of you are nervous. On the biggest stage of your life. Some may be scared. Don't be. Don't be scared. Don't be nervous. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. You can't play that way. You can't be looking over your shoulder. If you make a mistake, you're going to be forgiven. If you fall down, you're going to be loved. As long as you're true to your core values and you're true to yourself, you're okay. Don't be afraid about losing this game. We've already won. This game is the prize. This game is the prize that we're going to capture today. Stay true to yourselves. Surrender, forgive, and love. You do things that champions do. You act like champions act. You think like champions think. You've already won. You've already won the game. Now go out and collect the prize. As a great coach once said, his name was Peter, you fought the good fight. You've run the race. You've kept the faith. Now all you have left is to go out there and collect the prize. Are you ready? Yeah. Are you ready? Yeah. All right, let's go.
Well, today is one of the biggest annual celebrations in the United States. It's Super Bowl Sunday, a day of football, money, excess, food, and more. Businesses will spend millions of dollars for 60-second commercials. On television and radio and print and online, thousands upon thousands of hours have been spent in producing stories and finding every possible angle from the sublime to the ridiculous about some aspect of the game, the teams, the players, the coaches, and the fans. Billions of dollars will be bet not just on the outcome of the game, but on more things than you can imagine, including things like who will win the opening coin toss, whether the first missed field goal is missed to the right or the left, whether, you can bet on all these things, whether the number of the last person to score is odd or even. And while the Super Bowl is big business, unless one is coaching or playing in it, it's also just a game. A game which for most of us should be a diversion from the stress and work of everyday life. For us, it's not our life. Now, you all know that I like sports, and if you're a guest, I like sports. And images of sports and athletics and athletes are found in the Bible, including these words from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, where Paul writes, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners compete, but only one wins the prize? Run in such a way that you may win it. Athletes exercise self-control in all things." Just as an aside, I'm sure Mike would tell us that's not exactly true. But, athletes exercise self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable one. So I do not run aimlessly, nor do I box as though beating the air, but I punish my body and enslave it, so that after proclaiming to others, I myself should not be disqualified. On Super Bowl Sunday, whether we're sports fans or not, we can't escape the game. But I want to talk with you today about a game that's even more important, and that's the game of your life. And in many ways, our life is a lot like a football game. Let me count the ways. The first is, our life is like a football game in that there's a clock. Our time is limited, just as the time is in a football game. We only get so many years. We get one life. So we need to make the most of the days we have to live. That's what Pastor Mary read for us from Psalm 90. And none of us knows how long we're going to live. But Psalm 90 says, if we're healthy, if we're strong, if we're fortunate, we can hope for 80 years. So think about yourself for a moment, right? That's 4 quarters. So if you're 1 to 20 years old, you're in first quarter. If you're 21 to 40, you're in the second quarter. If you're 41 to 60, you're in the third quarter. If you're 61 to 80, you're in the fourth quarter. If you're over 80, you're in OT. You're in bonus time. Be grateful. However, as we all know, life holds no guarantees for how long we may live. So we need to seize the opportunity and make the most of it. We need to count our days that we may gain a wise heart, as Psalm 90 said. And we're never too young and we're never too old to be thinking about what God may want us to do with our life. And God is an important part of the question. It's not just, what do I want to do? But what does God want me to do with my life? What strengths, what talents, what abilities, what gifts has God given me? What am I passionate about? What can I do to leave the world a better place than I found it for future generations? How can I be a blessing to other people? The sooner we learn that a significant life is found in investing ourselves in answering these questions, the better off we'll be. And the more satisfying a life and a more contented life we will find. A football team knows that it will only possess the ball so many times in a game, so it's important to make the most of those offensive opportunities. And the path to a significant life also includes a wise heart that understands we only have so much time. Winning the game of life, secondly, requires faith and determination in pursuing our dreams, in pursuing our goals, even when some people tell us, you're not good enough to do that. Has anyone ever told you, well, you can't do that. You're not good enough to do that. You're not smart enough to do that. You're not strong enough to do that. It takes faith and determination to go forward. Those of us who are older, those of us who are parents, grandparents, we may be in the second half of life or more, we have a special role to play in encouraging younger people to pursue the dreams that God gives them. I was all set up for this Sunday in the hope that the Patriots would be playing. But since they're not, I'm going to talk about the Patriots anyway. And one of the most valuable players on the New England Patriots is a man named Julian Edelman. And wide receiver Julian Edelman is so critical to the Patriots' success that when he got hurt on November 15th, their whole season changed. Now, if you don't know the story of Julian Edelman, he's not a very big guy. He's actually shorter than I am. And he's had a remarkably hard journey to becoming an NFL star. He grew up in California. He was always small for his age. And even though he was very small, he had a father who coached him and pushed him very hard. He led his Pop Warner team to a national championship. Even though he was still very small for his size in high school, he led his team to an undefeated season as a quarterback. However, because he was so small, no college offered him a scholarship. So he went and he played at a junior college, and he had a great season and led his team to a great success. Only one school in the country still would even look at him or offer him a chance, and that was Kent State in Ohio, not exactly a football powerhouse. Julian Edelman shows up there in May. The head coach said they had no expectation that he would be the starting quarterback that fall. At one of the first practices Julian Edelman went to, he met the 6'6" starting quarterback who happened to be punting punting footballs on the field before practice. And Julian Edelman looked up at him and said, "You better get used to that because that's all you're going to be doing this season." It's a true story. And sure enough, he learned the whole playbook, won the starting quarterback job, and had great success at Kent State. But he knew he wouldn't be taken seriously as a potential NFL quarterback because of his size. Didn't let it deter him. He figured, well, I've got to learn how to do something else. Sometimes life means you got to change. And so here's a guy who's played quarterback his entire life, and now all of a sudden he realizes if I want to pursue my dream, I have to learn a completely different position. And he started returning punts his senior year of college. The Patriots drafted Julian Edelman in the final round. And when Belichick met him, he said, "We really don't know what we're going to do with you." They just liked how quick he was and thought he was a football player. And you know what happened. He just kept working hard. He kept shutting out the critics who told him what he couldn't do. And he did everything within his power to make himself better. He even spent time in Southern California when Tom Brady was living in Southern California so he could work with Brady in the off-season. And he has succeeded beyond anybody's wildest dreams. And 1 year ago became a crucial part of a Super Bowl championship team. Why? All because he had the faith and determination to pursue his dreams and his goals regardless of what other people said he could do. The third aspect of how winning the game of life is like a football game, in addition to having an awareness and urgency about time and having faith and determination, is to keep learning from our mistakes and making adjustments. As Coach Sherman said this morning, we have to be able to forgive ourselves and other people because everyone makes mistakes in life. We all do. For coaches and players, halftime is, I would imagine, a brief period of rest, reflection, analysis, and adjustments that are made to correct mistakes. And to win the game of life, we need to learn from our mistakes and make adjustments. Patriots coach Bill Belichick is a good example of this. So much of who Bill Belichick is today can be traced to who and what he was as the head coach for 5 years of the mostly unsuccessful Cleveland Browns. We should all say a prayer that we are blessed not to be Cleveland Browns fans. But it's the truth. And there are such stark differences between Bill Belichick's tenure in Cleveland and in New England. I mean, he's essentially the same person. He's just not entirely the same coach. The Browns were his training camp, his boot camp for success, said Mary Kay Cabot, who writes for the Cleveland Plain Dealer and covered his time with the Browns. He said there were mistakes he made here on players, personnel, staff, public relations, but he's the master of adjustments. He's learned how to do it right by everything he did wrong here. When the Browns fired Belichick, the decision was hailed as necessary and inevitable in Ohio, and one Akron columnist wrote, "Bill Belichick's 5-year reign of error is over." Think they'd like to take that one back? In 2000, a new reign began for Belichick here with the Patriots, and since then, we all know the errors have been much fewer. They're still there, though, some of them. But I'm not going to dwell on that this morning. While serving as New England's coach, Belichick's Patriots have won 4 Super Bowls, almost won 2 others, and one can argue that by the time he's done, he'll be regarded as the greatest coach in the history of the National Football League. In Cleveland, he won 37 games and lost 45 and had just 1 playoff win over the Patriots. In New England, he's 187-69 for an amazing .730 winning percentage, and his team is 22-9. in the playoffs. We all learn from our mistakes, said Ernie Accorsi, the former Browns executive vice president who hired the 38-year-old Belichick as the head coach in 1991. And I would pause there and say, hopefully we all learn from our mistakes. Because I know as a pastor that some of the most painful things that strike a family are the mistakes that people make that they repeatedly make and never learn from. Some of you have lived with that and are living with that. But fortunately, Bill Belichick learned from his mistakes, and he got fired, and he adjusted. And I think one of the mistaken assumptions that some people have about those who rise to the very top of their profession. I mean, think about it. What Mike Sherman has done is, there's only 32 jobs like that in the world. I mean, think how hard it is to be one of 32 people in the world doing anything. Think how hard it is to get there and to stay there. And I think one of the mistakes people make is they assume, well, people at that level, they never make mistakes. They never fail. Far from it. What is more correlated to being successful and significant is learning from our mistakes and making appropriate adjustments. So to win the game of life, we've got to make the most of the time we're given. It takes faith and determination and perseverance through the no's and the obstacles, like Julian Edelman. It means learning from our failures and mistakes and making adjustments, like Bill Belichick. Winning the game of life also means discovering our purpose so we can fulfill it. One of my favorite players in the National Football League is former Patriot Benjamin Watson, who this year had the very best season of his career playing for the New Orleans Saints. And Jackie McMullen wrote a story about him some time ago, and in it she talked about his upbringing and his life. And she said when Benjamin Watson was barely 4 years old, having already mastered the proper technique for a three-point football stance, he used to earnestly tug at his father's sleeve. "Dad, Dad," he'd say, "can you put me in the closet?" His father looked at him and said, "Why? Why should I do that?" And little 4-year-old Benjamin said, "So you can announce my name, so I can run onto the football field." And so began an early childhood ritual. Young Benjamin, crammed in with all of the coats, would patiently wait as his father, who was a pastor, would declare in a booming voice, "Now starting at running back for the Washington Redskins, number 45, Benjamin Watson." And at that moment, little 4-year-old Benjamin would come bursting out of the closet with his arms over his head, his eyes fixed straight ahead on the dream in front of him. And his dad said, "Ever since I can remember, if you ask Benjamin, 'What do you want to be?' his answer was, 'I want to be a football player and a missionary.'" Well, Watson's had a great career. He's, I think, clearly one of the most highly respected players in the National Football League because of who he is as a person as well. And he's answered the call of his faith. And Benjamin says, so much of football relates to the Christian life: sacrifice, commitment, discipline. I know God has a plan for me. I don't know what it is after football. Who knows? My grandmother and my father always said I would end up as a missionary. Well, I feel like I am one now. His father reminded him to praise God in the midst of his failures as well as his successes. I told him his love for God should be the same when he was dropping the ball as when he was catching a touchdown. I think when people see athletes being very demonstrative on the field about their relationship with God, they also want to see, what do you do when the game is over? If you're pointing your finger to the sky and praising the Lord after you score a touchdown, then you get off the field and you're a bum, well, who's going to believe in you, Ken Watson said. Well, Benjamin Watson has understood that being a person of integrity and using our time and talents to fulfill God's purpose for our life is part of winning the game of life. Some of us are much closer to the end of our life here on earth than the beginning. In football terms, we may be in the final 2 minutes or in overtime. And in a football game, at those moments, I would imagine that everyone's sense of awareness is heightened, that you're really focused on the moment, and you're trying to persevere through pain and exhaustion, and you know you're almost done and victory is within sight. But whatever quarter of life in which we imagine ourselves, and none of us really knows for sure, do we? It's not too late to invest our life, our time, our energy in serving others and finding God's purpose for our life from this point on going forward. When I was 7 years old, I remember sitting in my living room in Brookline and watching a movie with my family called Brian's Song. Some of you obviously remember that movie. It's about the relationship of two running backs with the Chicago Bears. Gale Sayers, who was African American and one of the all-time greats in the National Football League, and Brian Piccolo, who was actually born here in Massachusetts, obviously Italian, and he was white, undrafted out of college, like Malcolm Butler. He was undrafted out of college, even though as a senior at Wake Forest, he led the nation in rushing and in scoring, even beating out the two-time All-American Gale Sayers. And the film traces their relationship as competitors who eventually become friends. In 1967, Gale Sayers and Brian Piccolo became the first African-American and white man to room together in the National Football League at the height of the Civil Rights Movement. In the 9th game of the 1968 season, Gale Sayers suffered a devastating right knee injury that ended his season. It meant Brian Piccolo got the most playing time of his career, but he poured himself into helping his friend Gale Sayers recover from his injury. And Gale Sayers came back at the beginning of 1969, and even though that put Brian Piccolo much more back on the bench. And sadly, at the end of 1969, Brian Piccolo was diagnosed with cancer. About 6 months later, in May of 1970, when Brian's condition was very poor, Gale Sayers, who had recovered from his knee injury to win the NFL rushing title, was honored with the George Halas Award as the league's most courageous player in 1969. And at a ceremony in New York, Sayers gave a very emotional speech, saying there was somebody more deserving of the award. He said he has the heart of a giant and a rare form of courage that allows him to kid himself and his opponent, cancer. He has the mental attitude that makes me proud to have a friend who spells out the word courage 24 hours a day of his life. I love Brian Piccolo, and I'd like all of you to love him too. And tonight, when you hit your knees, please ask God to love him too. Sadly, Brian Piccolo died less than a month later on June 16, 1970, when he was only 26 years old. And the essence of the film Brian's song about love, race, and friendly competition is captured as the film ends.
Brian Piccolo died of cancer at the age of 26. He left a wife and 3 daughters. He also left a great many loving friends who miss him and think of him often. But when they think of him, it's not how he died that they remember, but rather how he lived, how he did live.
And if you've ever watched that whole movie, you're crying by the time that's on. And you know, the Bears still honor the memory of Brian Piccolo, 46 years and going. Every year, they still present the Brian Piccolo Award to the rookie and the veteran who best exemplify the courage, loyalty, teamwork, dedication, and sense of humor displayed by Brian Piccolo. But I always think of that clip because, you know, when we die, I don't think any of us want to be remembered necessarily for how we died, but for how we lived. How we lived. And we do that by making the most of the time we're given. Living with faith and determination, learning from our mistakes and making adjustments, and discovering and fulfilling God's purpose for our life. That's how we win the game of life. Will you join me in prayer? God, we thank you so much for the gift of your word. We thank you for how we can look at so many different aspects of life and learn from it. And God, we thank you that even something that so many of us enjoy, like the game of football, can illustrate for us principles that we can benefit from in our own life. And so, God, help us to learn and help us to understand that we were made to worship and to serve you. In Jesus' name, amen. For a final word, I want to share with you what I think is a great pregame speech by the poet George Bernard Shaw, who said, "This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being thoroughly worn out before you are thrown on the scrap heap, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live it, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of a splendid torch, which I have got a hold of for a moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. May that be true of us.